Greetings, fellow detectives. Wizard Kitten here, bringing you a new build in my series, Building Nancy Drew in The Sims 4. Today we are doing another apartment build, and this apartment was chosen by my patrons over on patreon.com/wizardkitten. So if you want to join those votes and have some exclusive voting power for which videos get made, feel free to check that out. I really wanted to do an apartment with a more feminine feel. And so I gave the patrons a few different options to choose from as far as which character I should use to kind of try and bring that vibe to life. And the patrons voted for Emily Crandall from Secret of the Old Clock, which I loved. I was super excited to try and make an apartment for Emily. And I really love how this space turned out, especially this main bedroom here. For Emily, I was so pleased with how this came together. My main idea for this was, what would an apartment for Emily Crandall look like in more modern times? So, I mean, in Secret of the Old Clock, Emily is a character who is alive during the 1920s, 30s era in which that game takes place. However, The Sims does not take place in the 1920s and 30s, so I wanted to try and reimagine what Emily would be like if she were alive during today's time, if she were still the same age as she is in Secret of the Old Clock, but within 2021, where we are now. And the kind of vibe that I got for that was that Emily would totally be like a food blogger and influencer. And I loved that idea. Like, she would have a beautiful baking Instagram, and she would maybe make YouTube videos about all of her baking videos. And I totally think that Emily would enjoy cottagecore. She just totally seems like that kind of person to me. And so I really went full out with that vibe when decorating this apartment. I went with a lot of vintage items. I went with a lot of things that I imagine would have been thrifted, and anything that wasn't thrifted is still very much within kind of the cottagecore theme. So we're thinking flowers, we're thinking pastels, we're thinking a lot of nature-inspired items, and just kind of beautiful, romantic, wholesome looks and aesthetics. So I had so much fun. I think my favorite part of this whole apartment is this gallery wall that I was putting together here. It was kind of inspired by a YouTuber I've recently found. Her name is Darling Desi, and she does a lot of like cottagecore, romantic academia, dark academia type videos, and I have just been living for the vibes lately. They just put me in such a happy headspace. So I used her bedroom as kind of inspiration for Emily's bedroom, and I just really like how it came together. It was wonderful. I also wanted to make this apartment part of my realistic save file that I've been working on in my free time, and this particular apartment is within the Culpeper House building, and all of the apartments that I have in this building are a little bit more run down. They're definitely more old and a little bit more dirty. So I imagine Emily living in this apartment, but making all sorts of modifications to it to make it still as cute and fun and clean as she possibly could. So like the wallpapers in the bedrooms, for example, I think that it is stick-on wallpaper. So like she would purchase it from a website and it would stick onto the walls and be able to be peeled off. So it's very much just for the aesthetic, and it would be something that she could take down. It would take so much time to do something like that, but I feel like if you're really going all out for an aesthetic kind of thing, then Emily would try to make it happen with kind of the stick-on wallpaper in an apartment where you normally can't do something like that. You're normally not really allowed to mess with the walls too much. So I really enjoyed the idea of her doing that, and then just filling each of the rooms in with as much thrifted and old style furniture as possible. So this apartment could be a 2-bedroom apartment, and I decided to make the second bedroom more of a little office space. So again, kind of going off the idea that modern day Emily works as a food blogger and influencer, particularly with baking. I think she makes lots of delicious pies, of course, probably based off of family recipes. So if we were to imagine that her family owned the Lilac Inn in the past, there would be so many delicious pie recipes recipes passed down through the generations. Can you imagine the quality of those pie recipes? Oh my goodness. The blueberry, the chocolate cream, the cherry. It's now making me very hungry and really, really want pie. But I totally think Emily would have all of those recipes, and she would share versions of them with her followers. I don't think she would share all of them. But I also really like the idea of this being a really cozy work from home space where she could do photo shoots and try out recipes in her pretty sizable kitchen. Honestly, like for an old kind of rundown apartment, the kitchen is actually like a very good size, and I think she would really make do with it. So I really liked that idea of a work from home space that worked really nicely for Emily, because I get the feeling that she really does not like to leave home all that often. I think she's really a homebody. I think she's very much an introvert. I think she would enjoy socializing with her followers through her platform, but other than that, really would not leave her apartment a ton. I don't imagine that she would do that. She would probably still go down to the food stalls, because I think she would be very inspired by food, and she would still like walk to the park and everything, but she would do a lot more solitary activities. I feel like, at least that's the vibe that I get for Emily, and kind of the vibe that I was going for when designing this apartment. Part of the reason that I love these apartment builds so much is trying to make an apartment with a very specific style still look very cute and like the character that I'm trying to convey. So even though we have this kind of crappy kitchen with the rundown counters, the browns, kind of the older colors, nothing looking very fancy or cute, I still wanted to try and make it look like a cottagecore kitchen. So even though I couldn't use the country kitchen stuff, which would have been perfect for the vibe that I'm going for, realistically, when you live in an apartment, you don't get to choose what your kitchen looks like. It's just kind of whatever it has, and then there you go. So I tried to fill it in with as many of the country kitchen kit decorative items as possible, and I really enjoyed the idea of using this big round table here, both as a dining table and also as like a cooking, baking, and photography space. I imagine that it would be very easy to kind of just like move items off of this table, and then Emily would like set up a little tripod and her camera and her lighting, and then make everything look very cute and aesthetic and beautiful and romantic for little photo shoots that she would do of all of her items. I really enjoyed that idea. And of course, all of these country kitchen kit decorative items are just the cutest, and I'm obsessed with using them, and I love how they looked in this space. And I'm honestly really happy with how the kitchen turned out, because despite it being really kind of grody and run down, I think it still ended up looking very cute as well. And the decorations and the pastels and really that color scheme and that whole vibe is really what made that possible, in my opinion. So that was a fun little challenge. It's always a fun little challenge trying to build spaces for the characters based solely on their personalities, especially characters who I feel like we don't really get to learn a whole lot about, and I think Emily is one of those characters. Like throughout the majority of Secret of the Old Clock, she tends to be a little bit more one note, very quiet. She's going through a lot, like she's been through a whole lot lately with the loss of her mom, and then feeling like she's going to lose the Lilac Inn, and then just all of the societal problems going on around that time period as well. Emily's going through it. So even though we don't get to learn a whole lot about her personality, I think the vibes that we get from her, and especially just like the way that she's sitting in her window seat wearing her little white nightgown and staring out the window, it just gives kind of like that whimsical, really reflective, introspective kind of vibe, which I think hopefully you guys think so as well, kind of suits this style. We're moving on to the living room now. My goal with the living room was to try and continue the color scheme, of course, so going with lots of pastels, and then also filling it in with a variety of furniture that I think would be thrifted, but also like worked really nicely together, and then cluttering up the space quite a bit with lots of decorations and books and things like that. I was very tempted to use the couch from Paranormal Stuff because it is my favorite couch in game, but I ended up using using the university couch in this pastel pink color, which I think is perfect for kind of a cottagecore sort of theme. And then this vampire's love seat, which I think is very just vintage and Victorian looking, which I think also fits in with the vibe quite nicely. Really enjoyed trying to find all sorts of unique old looking items. That was definitely a lot of fun. Putting this lamp, for example, from, I believe that's Cats and Dogs, question mark. And honestly, I was pretty happy with how all of the wood tones actually came together quite well. Oftentimes when you try to match items from different packs, the wood swatches that belong on each of the items really don't go together all that well. And I was pretty pleased that the wood swatches actually, like there were enough dark wood swatches that looked very similar, if not pretty much exactly the same to one another, for everything to be cohesive, which good for Emily and her thrifting skills if she was able to actually find pieces that not only had the same or roughly the same fabric colors, but also had the same wood tones. Very impressive. I am not a skilled thrifter. It's something that I wish I was much better at, but I feel like I can never find any gems. Like yard sales, garage sales, thrift stores, antique stores. I feel like I can never find those really cool, unique pieces at really good prices too. Because I'll definitely find really cool, unique pieces in antique stores, but then I'll look at the price and I'll just kind of like, my wallet chokes because it's so expensive for really like the pretty antique furniture that I have ever seen in antique stores. It's just, you know, it's out of the budget. It's not gonna work. So I wish I was better at thrifting. If you have any thrifting tips, any things that make it easier, particularly for I want to say like build buy items, because that's how you say it in The Sims, but not in real life, like furniture and decorative items, I guess is what I'm saying, rather than clothing, for example. If you have any tips and tricks for that, I would be very curious. I also stuffed this apartment with lots and lots of plants. I feel like not only does it go with the cottagecore element, but I think it matches Emily really well. I feel like a lot of the time people who are more like introspective, reflective, introverted get a lot of and it's weird to say it like this, but like social interaction from working with their plants, because it kind of gives that same vibe across. It's like caring for something, trying to get something to live and thrive. It's still kind of like an emotional connection, and I feel like Emily totally gets that with her plants, which I think is lovely. That's another thing that I'm not good at, is plants and keeping plants alive. I have long given up on trying to keep plants alive. It's not a strength of mine. I've recognized that. I've moved on with my life, but I wish I was good at plants. That would be kind of fun. I also can't have a lot of plants inside because Mel eats them. She's a cow. She likes to gnaw on anything green and literally chew it like grass. This is a thing that she does. I feel like this hallway entry area was the hardest one to really get the vibes across, especially trying to find items that were still functional but also still had kind of like a cottagecore feel. It was also just dark. There weren't any windows in this area. So I feel like I got enough items in this room. It's not exactly what I would have preferred, but it is kind of hard to do big, long hallways, so I guess I won't be too hard on myself. I did my best. I also struggled with this potted plant for a very long time, good long time, struggling with that plant, trying to find flowers that fit in there. And we'll add in a bunch of other functional items to this room as well. You know, the coat racks, the shoes. I do another little gallery wall on this farther wall just to fill in the space a little bit more, because I felt like that really needed to happen. But we're going to be coming up on the screenshots here very shortly. If you are curious or interested, you can certainly check out the channel Discord, Instagram, and Patreon page, all linked in the description of this video down below. Those are all certainly available. And as always, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more Nancy Drew and Sims 4 content. Thank you so much for watching, fellow detectives. I will see you soon.